Hey guys, Backwoods boys here. Welcome back to part 2 of this video. It was just getting a little long, so we cut her up here. If you haven't seen the first part of this, we encourage you to go back and see the first part and then watch this. The first part covered how to talk to anti-hunters about hunting issues. This part will discuss more what to discuss with them.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of scientific examples, the proper things to cite in order to effectively argue against a lot of the main issues that anti-hunters bring up. We'll be showing you common, frequently asked questions from antis, the best responses, and we'll be including the citations themselves on the screen. We'll show the titles, the authors of these actual scientific papers that are greatly useful for addressing anti-hunters' concerns.
Yes, and if you come up with any questions that we don't cover in this, please put them in the comments and we would love to think about them and get back to you on them.
So let's just jump straight into the first issue. One of the points to bring up is the idea of trophy hunting. Now, a lot of anti-hunters will hide behind the fact that they're against trophy hunting, not hunting in general. But their idea of trophy hunting is very poorly defined, and when you define it, their argument breaks down.
And I'll try to define that for you guys. Out of our family, I'd probably be needing the most trophy hunting out of all this. I love trophy hunting, but here's my definition of it. When I take an animal, we still use the meat. We need that meat. Wild game is our meat source through the whole year. We need that meat. So when I take a deer or a moose or whatever, we're using the meat. But I like trophy hunting. I like the challenge. So I'm aiming for a big, mature animal that's lived its life. And you know what? That means, yes, there's years where the deer and whatever's smarter than me, and I go with an empty tag. So with that in mind, if there was 10 people to go out hunting for deer, not trophy hunting, very likely there's 10 deer going to be taken out of that area. If you go with 10 trophy hunters into an area, you're probably going to take 3 or 4 deer out of there, which is much better for the population. You're taking the older ones, you're leaving the younger ones to grow and reproduce. It just balances things very nicely.
Proper trophy hunting can actually be very healthy for the population because you're taking the older animals that have already spread their genetics through the herd, and you're making room for new genetics, that so you don't get this weird skew of genetics towards one main father or mother in the area. So it's really actually a good, responsible way of hunting. Yes, you use the meat, like we do. We need that meat. But you don't just go kill anything. Trophy hunting can actually be a very good thing in that way. Another argument we often hear is that trophy hunting kills endangered species. And I mean, we've all heard that. There was a certain lion killed not too long ago that brought this argument. You hear it all the time with elephants and these other things. And it's not always true. In fact, it's rarely true. Yes, there's fewer elephants, there's fewer polar bears, lions, whatever, than other years. Especially if you look at their range as a whole. But you can't do that anymore. Humans have moved in, and their historical range has been divided up. So yes, there may be fewer elephants in one part of Africa. Zimbabwe has a thriving elephant population. In fact,
I would argue because thriving indicates healthy. This
True.
is not a healthy population.
No, it's not a healthy population, and that's what people fail to recognize. There's studies that show that elephants can cause incredible damage to forests at a density of 0.3 elephants per square kilometer, or 1/3 of an elephant per square kilometer. We've got populations of 3 elephants per square kilometer.
In Zimbabwe.
In Zimbabwe.
Not here.
No, not here. We as in human race. That's 10 times the sustainable level of elephant population. They're going through the vegetation, through the forest, they're wiping out vegetation. With the vegetation, they're wiping out invertebrates and bird species and small mammals. And so protecting these elephants is actually causing a lot of damage to the environment. So when people are claiming they're for the environment, that's not necessarily the case. There are cases where trophy hunting in specific populations is very important for population management. Another point that's often made is that hunting of these threatened species, elephants, lions, polar bears, that this should be banned in order to protect the population. The idea that if we're not bringing hunters in to hunt them, then the populations are going to thrive, there's going to be less killed, and everyone's going to be happy. This, shown by studies, is not true. This has been done or attempted to be done in different situations. One was with the CITES. Many of us have heard of CITES. It's intended to bring in regulations for exportation and importing of animals, especially threatened or endangered ones. In one case, polar bears specifically, this was brought in. New regulations were instigated for polar bear hunting in the north, again with the assumption that if we're not bringing in hunters from other places, these polar bears, their populations are going to thrive and we're going to have lots of polar bears. You know what they found? The exact opposite. It's the exact opposite because it all goes back to economics. You've got to remember that when people are able to hunt these animals have value to the average person.
If hunters are allowed to come up and hunt them, they have a tangible value to the specific person and to the community. You take that away, suddenly they're just pests. Before, if the polar bear came in and killed the guy's dog, well, you know what? We'll leave it. It's going to bring money to the community. Now, if the dog gets killed, well, the thing's useless to them anyway. They'll just go kill it.
That's exactly what they found, is that by bringing in these new limitations to reduce the number of external hunters hunting polar bears, the bears were just viewed as pests. There was more bears harvested after these limitations were brought in than there was before. It was actually, the way the paper describes it, negative conservation. More animals being killed due to these conservation moves than there were without them. So, in order to best protect these animals, an actual value to the community is really important. That's just how economics works in this world. Another point that can be brought up is that hunting contributes a lot of money to communities. Now, we already talked about the polar bears and the communities there, but in Africa especially, there was one specific study that examined the willingness of people to pay extra money if the money was going to a community. You know what they found? People were willing to spend $3,900 more for every 10% of the money that was going to the community rather than the government. That's pretty significant. That means that people from other parts of the world are going there and willing to spend way more money because it's benefiting other people. That's pretty good. And a lot of that money gets turned right back into conservation. There's been animals killed on the recommendation of biologists, even though they were threatened species, that these particular individuals had either outlived their breeding usefulness and were now contributing the same genes to the herd and causing declining genetic variability, or just that there was enough of the population that something could be taken out. And I know one case in particular, it brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the conservation. All that money, it never went to anyone except the conservation of that particular species. There's not a lot of $350,000 donations made for conservation. So in this way, one animal that had lived a long life did a lot of good for the rest of the species. Connected to this is that people will often argue, well, just go enjoy the animals. Go with a camera. I believe PETA had a shoot selfies, not animals, or something like that. That sort of mentality. Now, the funny thing is that studies have shown hunting is far more beneficial for a population and for an ecosystem than ecotourism. Now, one of these reasons is just pretty simple. There's a lot of driving and a lot of infrastructure required for ecotourism. Hotels and things like this, whereas a lot of the hunting requires a small lodge. It brings a lot fewer people for hunting, and they pay a lot more than ecotourists do. And so less people, less pollution, less carbon burned and introduced to the atmosphere. It's much better for the ecosystem to have high-paying, low numbers of hunters than low-paying, high numbers of ecotourists. And then the second part of this is that studies have shown that hunters require high levels of animal populations in order to be satisfied. They want to go out and see a great number of animals, big ones, small ones, all sorts of them running around. That's what makes them feel like they're doing a good job on their hunt, that they're seeing everything that they could be, and that they're having the experience they've always dreamed of. The average ecotourist wants to see a couple of this animal and a couple of that animal, and they're happy with much smaller populations. So what the studies have shown is that hunters, when they're the focus of the conservation efforts, the populations thrive, and there's much more species diversity and more numbers of each species for hunters than there would be otherwise for ecotourists. So that's a pretty important fact. Hunters actually encourage more conservation and greater numbers of animals to be left than ecotourism does.
It's because hunters have an investment into this and are investing in the future. And as hunters, we need to keep that in mind and inform anti-hunters that we're trying to do good here as well. You can't just pin us for killing animals. Look at the good we're doing through all of this.
Now, a final thing that you'll want to bring up, or that you can bring up, is it's a term called charismatic megafauna. And it's thrown around a lot in biology schools. I heard it a lot through getting my degree. Charismatic megafauna literally means big animals that get a lot of attention. Your elephants, your lions, your rhinos, your polar bears,
Whales,
things like that.
Things that people are well known with people.
Yeah. And as we've seen with protecting huge levels of elephant populations at the detriment of vegetation and invertebrates and small mammals, apparently it's not so much looking out for animals' welfare as it is looking out for recognizable and cute animals' welfare. And that's a point worth bringing up, is that if populations are let run out of check, then sure, we may be protecting these big, fuzzy, or bald in the case of the elephant, but these big recognizable creatures, and allowing them to wipe out all these other animals. And that's not fair. That's not fair to the animals, to the mice, to the insects, or even the plants, really, who are just less recognizable than the elephants.
You'll be saving some species, but damaging and potentially exterminating tens or even hundreds times as many in the consequences.
Yeah. So it's worth questioning whether they're actually after the protection of animals in general or charismatic megafauna. Because if you're after the protection of animals in general, then some responsible level of hunting is really important.
But remember to do it respectfully.
Yeah. Always be respectful. Remember that all these decisions on hunting are made by policymakers, and these policymakers have to be able to defend their decisions. There's three main ways that these decisions are defended. Number one is economics. Where's the money going? Are we going to gain money or lose money by making this decision? Number two is, what does the science say? Does the science support this decision, or are we going against the science? And number three is, what does the average public think? What's the public at large want us to be making for decisions? And in the cases of hunting, as we've shown, well, economics is clearly in favor of hunting. Science, in many cases, is in favor of hunting. Public support, a lot of cases not so much, but it's because they haven't been given the evidence and the facts to show that the economics and the science require healthy hunting practices. I mean, we can see this in airplanes. We all remember a certain lion that was killed a couple of years ago, caused a big uproar, and then airlines started shutting down, or at least one or two airlines decided to shut down transport of wildlife parts. This was based on those three decisions. They looked at economics, which tied directly into part three, the public interest, which we'll do together. Public interest. There's far more people outraged over the killing of that lion than there were who in support of hunting. They support the group that's against the hunting of lions and the hunting of animals in general. They're going to get a lot more business than if they said, well, we're going to support the hunters, the smaller group. And so that was a decision made not based on science, but based on public interest and economics. So unfortunately, we need to get 3 out of 3 because we don't do well when we're at 2 out of 3.
We need to get the public on board and informed and understanding. And if nothing else, seeing that we can be respectful in addressing this with those who may not be very respectful in return.
And remember, when you're in these conversations, they may throw science around terms and try and sound like they're using science. In most cases, they're using sensationalism disguised as science. A lot of times I've seen people say, from the anti-hunting side, well, you clearly haven't done your research, or science shows that hunting is bad. Well, as we've shown, that's not true. A lot of science shows that hunting is very good and very important in the maintenance of healthy ecosystems. And so we need to be vigilant and be active in bringing this science and bringing these facts to the general public to see. Because that's the only way that we're going to win them over, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to maintain hunting rights into the future. If we just let it go and either stop making our points or stoop to their level with name calling and swearing, and all that sort of thing, we've lost already. It's just a matter of time before it comes to a vote, and we're outnumbered. So we need to win public opinion over that, so we've got all three: economics, public opinion, and the science behind us. That's the way that we're going to make sure that hunting continues into the future.
We hope you guys enjoyed this video, but more so, we hope that you learn stuff from this video, that you can take facts out of this and little tips and tricks, and that you will be able to apply them. As usual, like, comment, subscribe. If you have questions or anything you want to share, by all means, put in the comment. We love hearing from you guys. But more important than probably any other video that we've done, and possibly any other video that we're going to do, please share this one. Get this out there to hunting groups, to family members, to friends, to the whole hunting community. Let's get everyone on the same page and handle this properly.
Yeah, we need to create the image that's going to get policies made in our favor. We need to gain the respect of the public and the policymakers. And these are some really crucial points for making sure that that happens. So thank you for watching. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you give us your thoughts in the comments. I'm guessing we're going to get some flack for this, so we're prepared. But hopefully you learned something. So thank you, take care, and we'll see you later.
Keep living wild and free.